First question comes from Volpect, who left an iTunes review and said, "Hello, Dr. Gundry. I love all of your podcasts. I just finished Energy Paradox, another great informative book. I'm having difficulty with the first mono meal. I need more simple ideas for protein, carbohydrates, and fats as they become introduced. Should the carbohydrate meal be mostly resistant starches? Should it include cruciferous veggies or salad? If making sweet potato hash browns, can I use olive oil to prepare them even though it is a fat? I need a little more direction on the specifics. Thank you for changing our lifestyle for the better." So that's a great question. I think I probably addressed a lot of those questions in what I just said. But you can have any primarily carbohydrate source. If you want to have a bunch of roasted Brussels sprouts as your first meal, go right ahead. If you want to have a salad with just a little spray of olive oil on it as your first meal, go right ahead. If you want to have a sweet potato as your mono meal, go right ahead. The really interesting thing about this is you don't have to be really concerned about whether the starches are resistant, whether they're, for instance, if you want to have pressure cooked basmati rice as your first meal, it'll work just fine. Do I think you ought to have that every day of your life? No, I'm not particularly impressed with the arsenic content of rice, but that's a whole different story. The point is, carbohydrates are really easy to get your arm around. You can have popped sorghum for breakfast as your first meal. And quite frankly, my wife often just has popped sorghum as her first meal, and works great for her. The sky's the limit in terms of protein. If you want to have primarily 3 shrimp as your first meal a day, go right ahead. If you want to have a piece of jerky, go right ahead, like I mentioned. So don't obsess as long as the primary ingredient is just one thing. But great question. Second question. For the energy paradox, how long do I wait between my first meal and my next? 30 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hours? So the important thing about all the studies, whether they're human studies or mouse studies, is anything goes, quite frankly, during that window of eating. And it really doesn't matter when you eat during that window of eating. And that, in a way, is very exciting. So if you're a person who wants to do the mono meal at 11 o'clock in the morning, and you feel odd that now you're going to have lunch at 1, go right ahead. And remember, the second meal can be an absolutely normal meal. If you want to say, well, I'm going to have my first meal at 11, and I'm not going to have my second meal till 4 o'clock in the afternoon, that's fine too. The important part is you can actually eat a full day's calories. You don't have to restrict the amount of food you eat. You just have to restrict the time period that you're eating that food in. So the great thing is you really don't have to go on a diet, which is great. This one's from Teresa J. Kirby on Instagram. Hi, Dr. G. I just finished listening to the Energy Paradox and loved it. For the controlled fasting, can you break fast at 7 a.m. and start fasting at 3 p.m. to 7 a.m.? Throughout the book, you always stress first meal at 1 p.m. Would love clarification on this, please. Thanks in advance. So that brings up a really interesting conundrum. So let me address that in one of two ways. First of all, as you know, I talk about the Ramadan fast. And it's what I call eat, pause, eat. During Ramadan, during the holy month of Ramadan, you have to eat breakfast before dawn, and then you don't eat or drink until after dusk. And that actually makes about a 12-hour fasting window. If you then add in sleep, most practitioners of Ramadan are fasting 20 out of 24 hours every day. So they actually have a 20-hour fast. They get all the benefits that ensue from a time-controlled eating window. So as I talk about in the book, there are a lot of people who just do not want to give up breakfast early in the morning. And if you're one of them, please try my Eat, Pause, Eat system and try to get a 12-hour window between the two meals that you're going to eat during the day. Now, to get to your question specifically, when I was designing this program for real people, I worked with my editor, and I said, if I was going to do this for real, I'd really like people to start eating at about 7 o'clock in the morning and finish up about 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then start their fast period. But working with patients, working mothers, families for over 20 years, it was very clear to me that that system is not doable in our society and to have a life. So if you like to do that, you're really doing it a great way, and keep up the good work on that. I shouldn't mention that when I write about what I do during the winter, as most of you know, I eat in a 2-hour window, the OMAD, 1 meal a day, and that window is from 5 to 7 o'clock at night. Now, is that the way I would really design it for perfection? No. But my wife and I both work. That's when we're home. And so that's the most practical way to have a life while eating 1 meal a day. Because if I didn't have a life, then instead of OMAD, I would go mad. So that answers your question. Next question. Hi, Dr. Gundry. I'm easily eating within an 8-hour window now. At what point should I stop decreasing my feeding window? Are there other ways to kick things up a notch? Well, human studies appear that a 6-hour window may have the maximum benefit. So that's 6 hours of eating, and that's 18 hours of not eating. I like the idea of not eating better than fasting, but because part of that time period you're sleeping, and you're not fasting when you're sleeping, you're not eating when you're fasting. And it just, to me, makes more psychological sense to call it not eating. There, as I mentioned before, a 4-hour window doesn't seem to add any additional benefit. To me, it makes a lot of sense to try during the week, during the winter months, to even compress that further to a 2-hour eating window. But I don't do that on the weekends. So on the weekends, I'm back to eating more to about an 8-hour window on the weekends. And there's some probably pretty valid reasons that we shouldn't constantly be in a 22-hour fasting window every day. But that's for another day. From Haneen on Instagram, for those who want to gain weight, is it possible to apply the time-controlled eating without losing weight? That's a great question. It turns out that one of the overwhelming benefits of time-controlled eating is that you will lose weight. And quite frankly, for most people in America, that would be a wonderful thing. However, I have a lot of very thin patients who I've used this program with. As long as you understand that you can overcompensate with the amount of food you eat during that time period, you can keep the weight on. In my practice, I've found that macadamia nuts are, number one, easy to overeat and get it into your system. The other thing we've gone to is encouraging almost overconsumption of resistant starches. And quite frankly, with some of the really great new pastas that are made out of cassava, you are going to get the mouth feel of what you're used to with pasta. And I've had some thin people very successfully implement this program and still maintain and even gain weight. But for the most part, it's a great weight loss program. Next question. Do you have any advice for pushing through the hunger pains? Well, first of all, long ago, I used to tell my patients to embrace the hunger and welcome it. But now, thanks to the Chinese study that I talk about in the book, I think the secret is prebiotic fiber. And for those of you who haven't read the book, there was a fascinating Chinese study that it's called the gut-centric theory of hunger, and that bacteria in our gut want certain things to eat. And quite frankly, the gut buddies want prebiotic fiber to eat. We can't digest it, it's for them. On the other hand, our gang members, as I talk about, want simple sugar and want saturated fats. And we now know they send messages to our brain to seek out the foods that they want to eat. So in the Chinese study, they took men and put them on either a 7-day or a 14-day water fast. The men were given 100 calories of prebiotic fiber. They couldn't digest the prebiotic fiber. It was for their gut buddies. And lo and behold, if you fed the gut buddies what they wanted to eat, even on a 14-day water fast, they had absolutely no hunger. And here's the other great news. Prebiotic fiber does not count against you during the fasting period because you're not getting any calories from the prebiotic fiber. The bugs are eating it. So I think it's just one of the most exciting parts of doing fasting properly is give your bugs what they want, and they will actually tell you that you're not hungry. And it's amazing what they actually control. Next question from Tony Catalanio on Instagram. I like to work out in a I like to work out in a fasted state first thing in the morning. I wake up and have espresso with MCT oil. I sometimes wait until 2 p.m. to have my one meal of the day. I do this about 4 times a week. Otherwise, my eating window is 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. I feel great, but people think I'm crazy. Should I eat right after my workout? Well, not necessarily. There are very good studies that show if you want to build muscle, then work out, particularly weight lift, resistance training, in a fasted state, and then wait about 20 minutes and have both a carbohydrate and protein meal or shake. And this actually stimulates insulin-like growth factor and moves protein into muscles. On the other hand, quite frankly, I think what you're doing is absolutely great. As you know, I do one meal a day during the winter, 5 days a week, so we're right on track. And the point is, you ought to feel great during this, and the whole point of the energy paradox is to show anyone who'll follow that you will feel great. So Tony, thanks for actually confirming. And no, you're not crazy. You're crazy like a fox. Next, from Stephanie Nyeritz on Instagram. Is intermittent fasting or fasting in general not as beneficial for women as it is for men? Should women fast differently or not fast at all on certain days depending on their hormone levels and where they are in their cycle. So first of all, if you have an eating disorder or a tendency to an eating disorder, then absolutely fasting, intermittent fasting is not for you. If you have an addictive personality, then intermittent fasting is not for you. If you are pregnant, actually I take that back, if you are trying to get pregnant, then intermittent fasting is not for you. And otherwise, even if you're pregnant or just having a regular, monthly cycle, intermittent fasting works just as well for women as it does for men. But those are the provisos that you really need to take into consideration. I have a number of women who practice intermittent fasting and thrive with that. So with those provisos, don't be afraid of it. Next question, how does the fasting technique in the energy paradox compare to techniques you've recommended in previous books? How do I know which one is right for me? Well, as I've written about in all of my books, all of them have a discussion in these various forms of instituting intermittent fasting, whether it's the 5-2 diet, whether it's the time-controlled eating that I talk about in all my books, whether it's the fasting mimicking diet that's been popularized by my friend Walter Longo, where you eat a pure vegan diet for 5 days in a row once a month. And his program, as shown in animals and in humans, mimics the effect of having a limited time window of eating as if you were doing it the entire month. And so there's lots of ways to skin a cat. In this book, I wanted to really concentrate on getting people to a point where they could easily time control their eating window. And the whole purpose of the book is not only to convince you that it's a good idea, which it is, but to hold your hand and get you to a point where this becomes a doable, non-suffering, enjoyable thing to do, and you take the weekend off. The great thing about this, you can combine this with, say, a fasting mimicking diet and have one of the weeks where you're only eating a vegan diet. And as you know, I have recipes in the longevity paradox and in the plant paradox to do just that. We have a 5-day fasting mimicking diet plan in both of those books. So you can mix and match. The purpose of the energy paradox was to really get you the tool to make time-controlled eating enjoyable and doable and have you not fall flat on your face like so many people do. Next, from Lacey Wilson on Instagram. I've seen some practitioners say fasting can negatively affect hormones and thyroid function. Is that possible? Well, actually, since I follow thyroid hormones, both free T3 and free T4 and TSH and reverse T3, in all my patients every 3 months, I can tell you one of the big benefits of intermittent fasting is improving thyroid function and improving thyroid delivery to the brain. We see a number of people whose TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, comes down and down and down during intermittent fasting, which is a great sign. It means your brain says, man, I've got so much thyroid hormone, I don't need to ask for anything more. We also see a number of people have a fall in free T3. And that once again means your body is just this incredible energy efficient producer, and it doesn't need the stimulation of T3 to do it. So please, this is all over the internet. This is actual patient data for over 20 years. And it does not affect your thyroid hormones. Interestingly, in that Italian athlete study I mentioned, the total testosterone of the time-controlled athletes actually went down, but their free testosterone, which is the active form of testosterone, didn't change. So no, it does not negatively impact your hormone levels. It actually dramatically improves thyroid function. From Erica GD on Instagram, is it safe to do time-restricted eating while pregnant? Yeah, actually it is very safe to do that. And one of the exciting things that is coming out of not only rat and mouse studies, but also human studies, is that time-restricted eating dramatically improves your gut microbiome to a much more friendly, anti-inflammatory microbiome. And one of the things that while you're pregnant you want to do is you want your microbiome to benefit your baby's microbiome. We now know you have a microbiome in your placenta. We now know your baby has bacteria while they're developing. So you want to give your baby the best possible combination of gut buddies, and intermittent fasting is one of the best ways to do it. Okay.